Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 8 of Pigskin Glory, where we go back in time 50 years to take a look at football. It is December 11th through the 20th this time. The NFL is ramping up into the playoffs. The college regular season has come to an end. Bowls are about to get underway. But we are going to discuss this 10 days in football history. Joining me clockwise, starting to my right, from Wisconsin, Chris Krager.
Good evening.
Down in the Pennsylvania area, getting ready for a snowstorm, it's Mark.
Hi, everybody.
And out in California, when the next time it snows will be the first, Charles.
That's right. Yes.
All right, so we start on December 11th, which is a Thursday, and it starts with a Peanuts cartoon, still continuing the line of Marcy learning football from Peppermint Patty. Marcy's holding the football, and she says, "Okay, Ball, before I kick you, I want to apologize. I want you to know there's nothing personal in this, that I intend you no harm, that I hope this kick does you no injury, and that just kick the ball, Marcy! Patience, sir, these are things which must be said." Mark, this storyline in the Peanuts universe differs from our normal football lines, and it's obvious Charles Schultz was a football fan. What do you think of the interaction between Marcy and Peppermint Patty here?
I like it, but you're all right. It is different. These two are kind of forgotten characters in the Charlie Brown universe.
Chris and Charles, any other thoughts on this before we move on?
What the Mark just said.
If Lucy
always Charlie Brown, Lucy daring Charlie Brown to kick the football and not succeeding.
If Marcy or Peppermint Patty held the ball, maybe Charlie Brown would have actually made a kick.
Maybe.
Good point. All right, so let's get on to some news. It is official. Don Strock will face the Colts this weekend. 1972, Don Strock led the NCAA in passing while at Virginia Tech, and now he's going to be the starter for the Miami Dolphins. Charles, how does this change the game plan for the Colts going into this big, huge AFC East matchup?
It's very huge. I think Baltimore right now, I think, is in the catbird seat as far as the AFC East is concerned.
Actually, it's not that, Charles. If Miami wins, they win the division. If the Colts win, then they control their destiny.
Oh!
This is a really big game in the AFC East regardless.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Len Dawson's career might be over. Great passer overtaken by age and injuries. Chris, sum up Len Dawson's career in a few thoughts.
The first great Boilermaker passer that led to all the great quarterbacks that came after him. And with all due respect to Joe Namath, in my opinion, the greatest AFL quarterback of all time.
So he did win 3 AFL championships.
What?
Go ahead, Charles.
When I think of Len Dawson, I think of him as a color commentator for NBC after his playing career ended, working alongside Charlie Jones.
So Mark,
and Vinny, you remember him, of course, from inside.
Go ahead, Chris.
And Vinny, you remember Len Dawson from inside the NFL with Nick Buonicotti.
No, I don't. I didn't have cable at that point.
Mark, you remember Len Dawson post-playing career?
A little bit, yes.
Mark, Len Dawson won 3 AFL titles, the most out of any of the starting quarterbacks. I mean, you could look at George Blanda winning 2, Jack Kemp winning 2. 3 is definitely the number. Makes the Dallas Texans / Kansas City Chiefs the AFL's team of the 60s.
Yes, it does. He was the best there was at that time, and I think he helped define the modern era quarterback.
And that's not including all the games they won in 67 or 68 that gets overlooked because of the Raiders.
If his career is indeed over at the end of the 75 season, Charles, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer eligible in 1980?
Yes. Based on what Chris and Mark and Vinny just described regarding Len Dawson's career.
All right, moving on to December 12th now. Coach of the Year is on the line in the Dolphins-Colts game, and X-11 Colts are members of the Dolphins and will return to Memorial Stadium. Chris, there's a lot on the line in this game, as we've talked about before. But when you're talking about Don Shula or potentially Ted Marchibroda as coaches of the year, who do you think has the edge in this matchup?
I think it's got to be March or Broda. Remember, the Colts were 2-12 last year, and with Don Shula, it seems like the guy always wins in Miami. I mean, they won 11 games last year, and I know they lost a few guys, but remember, the Colts were not predicted to do anything this year. I don't think people had Miami falling apart. And let's be real, Baltimore has done more with less. Miami, outside of those WFL guys, have a lot of guys returning.
The experts are picking the Dolphins to win this game, but Mark, the Dolphins have not had that same dominance in '75 as they had in previous years. Baltimore seemingly coming out of nowhere. Are they primed to win their first AFL or AFC Eastern Division title since 1970?
Yes, I think age, free agency, injuries has caught up to the Dolphins. I think Baltimore is in a good position to steal this one from Miami and to win the AFC East.
And indirectly, if you remember the fumble controversy, yes, Luke, I think the Dolphins might be overdue for a little karma against them.
Here's an interesting little note. The Memphis Grizzlies of the World Football League have applied. We talked about that in the last episode to join the NFL, and the NFL is going to take a look at it, according to Dan Rooney, chairman of the NFL Expansion Committee. Now, Charles, they're already expanding to Seattle and Tampa Bay in 1976. Could Memphis and a potential other WFL team join in, say, 77 or 78, putting the NFL to 30?
If the financing is there and the monetary wherewithal, then perhaps. You don't got to have a good financial structure in place here. You don't want to expand too much so quickly. Like in baseball in 1969, baseball expanded by 4 teams, and the Seattle Pilots moved to Milwaukee after one season. The Pilots struggled out of the gate for the first 5 years. They nearly moved to Washington prior to 1974 before Ray Clark bought the club. So you have a good sound strategy for expansion.
All right, let's take a look at some transactions. And the UPI's all-rookie team is announced. Seattle expansion team has signed wide receiver Dave Williams, most recently with the World Football League's Southern California Sun, to a contract in 1976. And the all-rookie team has been announced. This is both the NFC and AFC. Quarterback Steve Bartkowski of the Falcons, running back Mike Thomas of the Redskins, Don Hardiman of the Oilers, wide receivers Rick Upchurch of Denver, Fred Solomon of Miami, tight end Russ Francis of New England. The offensive lineman tackles Lynn Bowden of Detroit, Jeff Seavey of Chicago, guards Burton Lawless of Dallas, Noah Jackson of Chicago, and center Bill Reed of San Francisco. Kicker Steve Mickemeyer of San Francisco. Mark, any glaring omissions on that offense before we look at the defense, or what do you think of the UPI selection?
I think it's pretty much spot on.
Mark, remember this name, Rick Upchurch.
Yeah, I'll remember that. Okay, I'll pay attention to that name with time.
By the way, Charles, Freddie Solomon, that's the same Freddie Solomon who was on the 49ers' first 2 Super Bowl teams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was
E2, E1, and then 45.
Yep.
Over on the defensive side, defensive end Mac Mitchell of Cleveland, Mike Hartenstein of Chicago, defensive tackle Lewis Kelcher of San Diego, Roger Stillwell of Chicago, linebacker Steve Towell of Miami, Robert Brazil of Houston, Randy White of Dallas, cornerback Monty Jackson of Los Angeles, and Tony Peters of Cleveland. For the defensive back, safeties Ed Jones of Buffalo, Johnny Gray of Green Bay, Neil Colsey of Oakland, punter Neil Claybo of Minnesota. Chris, what do you think about this defensive rookie team?
Well, you got some real good names. You got Kelcher, Robert Brazil, future Hall of Famer, Randy White, future Hall of Famer, Monty Jackson had some good years with the Rams. Unfortunately, Vinny, the Bills, the Buffalo has the wrong Ed Jones. They basically got Ed Jones, just not the one that we all remember.
Not tall enough, Ed Jones.
This one is too tall.
The college Walter Camp All-American team. On the offense, tight end Benny Cunningham of Clemson, wide receiver Steve Ribera of California, tackle Dennis Lick of Wisconsin, and Bob Simmons of Texas, guards Terry Webb of Oklahoma, Randy Johnson of Georgia, center Rick Bonas of Nebraska and quarterback John Sierra of UCLA. Running back Archie Griffin of Ohio State, Ricky Bell of USC, Tony Dorsett of Pitt, and Chuck Bunsey of Cal. Mark, what are your thoughts on this All-American Walter Camp team offense?
That's a heck of an offensive lineup, and those are future names that'll be well remembered for a long time.
On defense, we've got Leroy Cook of Alabama, Jimbo Elrod of Oklahoma, tackle Leroy Selman of Oklahoma, Steve Niehaus of Notre Dame. Linebackers in the middle, Dewey Selman of Oklahoma, linebackers S.D. Simonini of Texas A&M, Greg Buttle of Penn State. I'm thinking that's a typo, Ed Simonini. Greg Buttle of Penn State, Don Dufek of Michigan, defensive backs Chet Moeller of Navy, Pat Thomas of Texas A&M, Tim Fox of Ohio, and kicker Chris Barr of Penn State. Charles, any names that stand out to you as future NFL standouts?
Todd, maybe Leroy Cook potential from the Roll Tide.
Selmans. Leroy
Yeah,
Selman. That's the
Oklahoma's brothers, Leroy
I'm
and Dewey
I'm
Selman.
also good. I'm a little biased here, but I'm still going to go with Barr from Penn State.
And Mark, here's the irony. He's going to end up being. And Mark, here's the irony. Chris Barr is going to be a nemesis for you in the pros with the Raiders.
Yes, he will be.
Well, Chris Barr also had as we talked about in an earlier episode, a longer year than normal as he wasn't able to play soccer this year. Senior Bowl South selections from the quarterbacks: Richard Todd of Alabama, Scott Gardner of Virginia, running back Jimmy DeBose of Florida, defensive lineman Leroy Cook of Alabama, Kenny Bordelon and Steve Cassidy of LSU, Rick Tehiard of Auburn, Ben Williams of Mississippi, linebacker Sammy Green of Florida, defensive backs Jay Chesley of Vanderbilt, Wayne Rhodes of Alabama, linebacker Woodrow Lowe of Alabama, running back Willie Shelby of Alabama, and Bubba Bean of Texas A&M. Chris, the Senior Bowl, not sure what day it's being played and not sure how many college all-star games are in 75. We'll have to look that up. But is the college all-star games, is that a good way to raise your draft stock in 1976?
Well, I think it helps, but remember, there's also the blue-gray game, which used to be played, the blue-gray game, and some of these other bowl games, and there is the Senior Bowl. Although I will say, the only names from that I know are Richard Todd, future Jet, and Woodrow Lowe, who actually had some pick sixes when he went to the Chargers.
Well, now we move on to Saturday. NFL transactions. Seattle, once again in the news, have named Don Anderson, former vice president for public relations for the WFL, as their PR director of Expansion Club. The Canadian Football League, Hamilton coach Jerry Williams and general manager Ralph Sazzi have announced their resignation. All right, we get into the games now.
By the way, I want to go. By the way, one more thing. Vinny, you mentioned Dave Williams in one of your things. I forgot to mention. That's the guy. Remember when the Bears beat the Lions on that opening kickoff in 1980 on Thanksgiving Day? That's the same guy who returned that touchdown.
Nice. Saturday NFL football, the Bengals and Steelers. Pittsburgh drops the curtain on Cincinnati 35-14. This was a big one in the AFC Central. A Steeler win locks up the division title and home field advantage. A loss, however, would result in a tie, while Pittsburgh still has to finish up at the LA Rams. But Pittsburgh did what they do against everybody not named Buffalo: dominate. They ran for 191 yards, ran for 3 scores, and even got a fumble return on defense. At 12-1, the Steelers, since that Bills outlier, have looked close to invincible, a team as there is. Mark, the Steelers are rolling heading into the playoffs, looking to repeat. Who is the best chance to knock them out?
In 75, I'm going to say probably the Raiders. If there's one team that would scare the heck out of me, because we split with them in 72 and 73, it is this team. And even last year in the AFC Championship game, we didn't put that game away till the fourth quarter. The Raiders would be the team I would think that could, if anybody could beat them, it would be them.
The Steelers and Bengals fought all season for AFC Central supremacy, but when they played on the field, it was Pittsburgh who flexed their muscles. This play shows how much better Pittsburgh was than Cincinnati when J.T. Thomas came up with a touchdown, finishing up a turnover that involved Dwight White, Jack Lambert, and Thomas himself. Charles, take a look at this play, and it just shows you how big and bad the Steel Curtain defense is.
And they've beaten some good teams. You know, they beat Cincinnati, they swept Cincy, they swept Houston. You know, they got some good wins.
Yeah, the Bengals were 10-1 against everybody else, but against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 0-2.
Because they didn't the Oilers in '75 have about 9 or 10 wins themselves that year.
Yeah, remember they against everybody not named Cincinnati or Pittsburgh, they beat literally everybody else except for those two teams.
Even for Houston in '75, they weren't a bad team. So
They beat
I mean,
Miami. They beat Miami. They beat Washington.
It shows you how tight that AFC Central was.
Now we move on to the Redskins and Cowboys, and Dallas drills Washington 31-10. This was a big one. Football's best rivalry, a literal playoff game before the playoffs. Loser leaves town. When Washington jumped out to a 10-0 lead, it looked like Dallas was about to miss the playoffs in consecutive years for the first time since 64-65. After Staubach threw a 57-yard touchdown bomb and ran for a score, it was 14-10 after 3 quarters. Then the roof fell in for the Skins. They turned it over 4 times and ran for only 81 yards, while Dallas, much maligned running game, even without Scott Laidlaw, ran for 207 yards. The coup de grace was Charlie Waters' pick sixth cap off of the Cowboys' stampede of 31 unanswered points. Dallas is back after a 1-year postseason hiatus, while Washington, for the first time under George Allen, will be home for the playoffs. Chris, the over-the-hill gang is perhaps on the downward side of that over-the-hill. Dallas moves on to the playoffs and Washington is out. St. Louis is most likely in. What does the NFC look like for playoffs?
Well, it kind of looks like last year, only difference. Well, Dallas is kind of hard to gauge. You know, they beat Washington, they beat the Rams, but they've lost to the Packers, the Chiefs, they barely beat the Patriots. And by the way, St. Louis can actually clinch the NFC East if they win on Sunday at Chicago.
Charles, I'm always big nowadays to talk about celebrating before you score, and Charlie Waters just does just that. When we get back to the beginning of this play, he actually raises the ball around the 5-yard line, going in for the touchdown. He was that sure of his touchdown, and it did pay off. Let's take a look at this. Well, at the 10, he raised it up, but that's not necessarily something I would consider good sportsmanship. And again, I'm anti-Dallas, so I guess I could be a little biased. But what do you think of a play like that, Charles?
On this pick six series, probably ecstatic that he got the interception here.
By the way, how's this for irony, Charles? It was a fastball thrown by Randy Johnson.
Yes, the Washington.
Illinois in those days.
The Washington quarterback was Randy Johnson.
Whoa!
That's what I was referencing, Charles. That's why I said a fastball thrown by Randy Johnson.
Wow.
And no pigeons were harmed in the making of this pick six.
No. Here's a little Easter egg for you. Future 49ers and Lions head coach Steve Mariucci was the starting quarterback for Northern Michigan in 1975, and here he sparks a Wildcat comeback against Western Kentucky by hitting Skip Mitchell on a 49, ironically, yard touchdown pass before the half.
And ABC carried this game. A young Ron Lundquist was calling this game on ABC.
This is the national championship.
Wait, Vern Lundquist? I thought it was the Cowboys race, so he wasn't calling the Washington game.
Yeah. According to archive506sports.com, Vern Lundquist, along with Lee Grosscup, did the Northern Michigan Western Kentucky game taking place at Sacramento.
Well, to quote Vern himself, my goodness.
So this game was played in Sacramento?
Yes.
Nice.
And Steve, how about that? Steve Mariucci, future Niner, 49 yards.
I had no clue he was a quarterback. Never dawned on me.
Yeah, I wonder if he ever told that to Steve Young.
I always tell people you never know who was what in high school because I may look like a fat lineman, but I was a quarterback in high school myself. Not a good one, but I was one, to say the least.
Definitely better than definitely a better quarterback than some of the guys we saw in Christmas yesterday.
Passing away on December 14th, 1975, Tilly Voss, Walter C. Voss. He was an end and tackle for the Detroit Tigers in 1971, the Buffalo All-Americans in 1921 as well. I meant 21, not 71. the Rock Island Independents and the Akron Pros in 1922, the Toledo Maroons in 1923, the Green Bay Packers in 1924, the Detroit Panthers in 1925, the New York Giants in 1926. He actually spent a couple years with the Bears, 27 and 28, before joining the Dayton Triangles in 1929 and ending his career with the Buffalo Bisons in 1929. At the age of 79, Walter C. Tilly Voss passed away December 14th, 1975, in Detroit, Michigan.
A legend.
Well, it's time now to look at the games on Sunday, the penultimate week of the NFL season. After this, there's just one more week, and the Saints versus the Giants. New York neuters New Orleans 20-14. In the Giants' last game before moving to the Meadowlands next year, they at least went out on a positive note thanks to their special teams. New York returned a punt for a touchdown and set up another touchdown thanks to a blocked punt. But when you have the 2-10 Aints versus the 3-9 team playing out a string at Shea Stadium, this was truly one of the football games of all time. Chris, your thoughts real quick on this game between the Aints and the Ions.
New Orleans. How many more ways are they going to invent ways to lose? Now it's special teams. What's next? Are they going to lose a game? What's next for the Orioles? It's like they're inventing ways to lose. That Charles, it goes back to that Casey Stengel quote. That applies to these Saints.
Yep. I knew ways to lose I never knew existed before.
First, we had just
Craig
shown
Morton,
future NFL head coach and Steve Mariucci. Here's another one catching the pass. Future NFL head coach Ray Rhodes of the Eagles. As the Saints and Giants in 1975 was a blunder bowl, but here the Giants have a highlight touchdown. Craig Morton found Ray Rhodes from a 45-yard touchdown pass. Rhodes juggled the ball, and New Orleans forgot in the NFL they have to touch the guy down.
and somewhere Giants management is looking at that touch by Greg Morton and said, "Yeah, who needs Randy White?" And Mark, within 3 years, he's going to be your savior.
Number 36 of the officiating staff actually comes in to mark the play down. You'll notice, but he doesn't, and he's the one that signals touchdown.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
When you think Craig Morton, you think Dallas and Denver. You don't think Giants.
The question is did Craig Morton catch that pass, or did it hit the ground? And from this angle, it's too hard to tell. And of course, it's the only angle we have 50 years later.
Well, it is the Saints, so you figure something like this would happen to them.
Yep. Let's just see what other touchdowns we'll have. Falcons, Bills, Raiders, and Raiders again. So Falcons, Bills, and a couple Raiders when we get to them. Okay. The Chiefs and the Browns. Cleveland chops KC 40-14. The Browns have played a murderous schedule. Only one of their losses came against a team below 500 in Denver. Against a Chiefs team that allowed winless San Diego to get off the schneid, Cleveland looked like a Super Bowl team. Greg Pruitt ran for 214 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their defense forced 4 turnovers and even recorded a safety. Kansas City is the definition of a schizophrenic team. Wins over Oakland and Dallas, lose to the Chargers and Browns, who at one point both in a winless Turtle Derby. Charles, how do you explain the 1975 Kansas City Chiefs?
Schizophrenic here. Because they can beat some great teams, but can't beat the Chargers or Browns. Both what?
We saw that Monday night game in Dallas. It's like they scored 35 in Dallas in a game we saw, but they gave up 40 to Cleveland.
Yes, and if you want to see us watch that game and our reactions to it, join my Patreon where you can have access to that video of us watching the Monday night game between the Cowboys and the Chiefs.
And think about that, Mark. Only one of their losses was against a team below 500.
The Bills at the Patriots. Buffalo circles New England's wagons 34-14. The first time these teams met, it was one of 1975's most entertaining offensive barn burners. The rematch was no match. The Bills ran for 349 yards, with O.J. and Jim Braxton each rushing for over 100 yards. Buffalo's much maligned defense registered 8 sacks and 6 turnovers. It was a valiant effort after last week's Orange Bowl heartbreak and has secured a 3rd straight winning season for the Bills. Chris, the Bills run for 349 yards. They have one of the best offenses in all of football. But as we know, they're going to be staying home for the playoffs because their defense really let them down in 1975.
Bills defense is honestly really weird because they have takeaways, they have sacks, they're good at making the splash plays, but their problem is they don't make the simple plays. Like
they lack fundamentals.
How did I post a touchdown, a run that wasn't a touchdown? Well, it's too late to go back and fix it now, but this was one
anyway,
of OJ's
think
runs
about. By
against.
the way, by the way, OJ Simpson, he may not run for 2,000 yards, but he's almost has twice as many touchdowns as he did in 73.
Falcons versus 49ers. Atlanta strikes gold against San Francisco 31-9. After playing over their heads versus Oakland and Washington, the Falcons easily could have had a letdown versus the Niners. Despite giving up 212 rushing yards, Atlanta won the turnover battle 2-0. While Steve Bartkowski had his breakout game, 305 yards and 2 touchdowns. As for San Francisco, this could have been Steve Spurrier's last game. A 49er since 67, one has to suspect he won't be protected in the upcoming expansion draft. Charles, the 49ers could be moving on. They lost John Brody to retirement a couple of years back, and now Steve Spurrier could be heading out the door. What does the future hold for San Francisco's quarterbacking room?
Jim Plunkett, calling Jim Plunkett.
Jim Plunkett just needs an offensive line.
You know what? Going back to that, as we watched this Alfred Jenkins touchdown from Steve Bartkowski, going back to that O.J. Simpson run, if I actually shared the videos like I back, on December 14th, like I do now, I would have noticed that that wasn't a touchdown and would have been able to fix it. So I apologize for that. One of the 1,300 plus touchdowns on the page is not a touchdown.
Vinny, what do you think of Atlanta? They damn near beat Oakland. They damn near beat Washington. Bartkowski's played 2 good games. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? They seem to have figured something out with their number 1 draft pick.
Well, they definitely have something in quarterback Steve Bartkowski is kind of putting some other pieces together. Uh, you know, getting him before you lose guys like Claude Humphrey or Mr. Falcon there. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Tommy Nobis.
Tommy Nobis.
Tommy
yeah.
Nobis.
All right. The Dolphins versus the Colts. This was a massive game in the AFC East. If Miami won, they would have clinched the 5th straight division title. If Baltimore won, they would control tiebreakers thanks to a season sweep. Through 3 quarters, the Dolphins led 7-0 and were poised to once again deny an upstart team just as they had done to Buffalo. However, Don Strock's magic of last week was nowhere to be found in the Baltimore fog. 8 of 19, 97 yards. The Colts had 0 turnovers to Miami's 2 and kept it close long enough to tie the game up. In overtime, Baltimore was pinned at their own 4-yard line, but clutch third down conversions enabled them to get into field goal range for a walk-off kick. Baltimore once again defied the odds as they became the first team to sweep Miami under Don Shula and now controls their own destiny. Miami, on the other hand, needs to beat Denver next Saturday, then cross their fingers woeful San Diego or New England can pull an upset. Otherwise, they'd miss the playoffs for the first time since their AFL days. Chris, the Dolphins, what sunk the Dolphins in 75 more than anything? Was it the quarterbacking situation or was it the loss of the running back trio to the World Football League?
Actually, I don't think it was either. I think what actually ended up sinking them in 75 was those 2 extra points in Houston, which cost them the Oil game when they had only 1 loss. That's 2 points off the board in a game they lost by only 1.
That's a good point. What is
And Vinny, I'm sure you have. Vinny, I'm sure you gotta love this. As much as you hate Miami, I know they swept the Bills, but I know this has to be a little bit of a makeup for you.
Well, remember, as I've always said in a previous life, I was a Baltimore Colts fan, a John Unitas fan. I ain't being esoteric, obviously, but obviously the Colts would have been the team that I would have rooted for when if I were alive when John Unitas was playing. So I'm definitely, if it can't be the Bills, it's definitely good for it to be the Baltimore Colts. In about 8 years, when we discuss a certain move in the middle of the night to Indianapolis, I'm going to have a much different opinion. The Cardinals versus the Bears. St. Louis clobbers Chicago 34-20. After last week's Dallas demolition, the Cardinals had 2 match points to clinch their 2nd straight NFC East title. Turns out they only needed 3 quarters. For the second straight week, the Cardiac Cards had a breather as they led 34-0 before maximum garbage time points from Chicago. Jim Otis ran for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns to become the second 1,000-yard rusher in team history. Jim Hart made his 9 completions count with 172 yards and no mistakes. St. Louis and Don Coryell proved last year was no fluke and that the NFC East is no longer a Cowboys-Redskins monopoly. Mark, the St. Louis Cardinals are your NFC East champions. They will have a better chance to get to the Super Bowl than Dallas. Of course, they're not guaranteed a home game in 1975, but what are the Cardinals of 75, their chances going into the playoffs compared to 74?
I think it's a lot better, and like you said, they've got the division. They're not going to be in the wild card round, and they're making the most. They made the most of the situations count today. If they make the most of their situations count, they should have. They could be a legitimate threat anywhere, home or away.
The Oilers versus the Raiders. Houston strikes oil in Oakland 27-26. The Oilers' second straight road game in the Bay Area was as fruitful as their first. Pastorini threw for 2 long touchdowns. Their defense forced 6 turnovers, and they scored the winning touchdown with no time left. The Oilers may be 0-4 against Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, but are literally undefeated against the rest of the NFL. It wasn't a lost cause for the Raiders. Miami's loss ensured a number 2 seed as Oakland has the head-to-head tiebreaker over whoever wins the AFC East. Charles, the Oilers are 10-0 against everybody not in their division, and the Cleveland Browns, but 0-4 against the 2 teams that are going to the playoffs in the AFC Central. What does Bum Phillips have to do to get the Oilers through the door?
They get a couple of bad defensive players and they're stand toe with the Pittsburgh Steelers current defense and the neutralize Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris a little bit. As far as the Raiders goes, they'll now host Cincinnati in the playoffs, while Pittsburgh hosts either Baltimore or Miami.
Mark, are you a component or are you in favor when teams change uniforms and having a resurgence like Houston did in 75? I'm not sure if they changed to these white helmets in 74 or 75, but as we've seen throughout history, your Denver Broncos changed uniforms in the midst of a huge 3-year run. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers came out of nowhere after changing their uniforms in 97. The Rams strangely changed their uniforms after winning the Super Bowl, but the Oilers had a resurgence in 75, and the new white helmets, do they play any part in the team psyche of abandoning a losing look?
History would suggest that. I mean, like of all the teams you've named, and now this one, uniform changes seem to motivate players. It seems they play sometimes everything I've seen differently.
Baseball, for 3 examples. The 87 Twins changed uniforms, they won the World Series. The 2002 Angels changed uniforms, they won the World Series. And the Rays, last place the first 10 years, dropped double on the name, changing uniforms, went to the World Series.
Hey, Vinny, you forgot the Bengals. Didn't they go to it? Vinny, you forgot the Bengals. Yes. They went to it.
Yes, I would say this. In modern times, I think too many teams change their uniforms too often, so it's harder to quantify that. But yes, back in from the 70s to the 90s, there is a strange parallel with teams improving their lot after changing uniforms. Take a look at this touchdown that we've seen over and over. The Oilers wanted to be taken serious as contenders, but the Raiders stood in their way and opened scoring in the first quarter with this Ken Stabler hitting Cliff Branch from 21 yards out. And that's not the only touchdown we have.
Holy Toledo. By the way, Vinny, Charles, you talk about what the Oilers need. You know what I think the Oilers could use? A second wild card. If the NFL had 2 wild cards, Houston would actually be in a win-and-in situation next week. You think the Oilers would be dangerous if there were 2 wild cards available?
Who knows?
The Oilers are building something in 75. The Oilers are building something in 75, and 0-0 Ken Burrow catches a screen pass, and the Raiders couldn't find him as he takes the Dan Pastorini pass 68 yards for the score.
Almost nice.
Almost nice. It was nice. No, it wasn't almost. It was nice.
We're not done, though, on this weekend as we got the Eagles and Broncos. Denver dashes past Philadelphia 25-10. The Broncos defense forced 5 turnovers, but the story of the day was Floyd Little, playing his final home game of a stellar 9-year career. It was a storybook ending, 150 yards rushing and receiving, a 2-yard touchdown run, and a 66-yard touchdown catch. What a way to go out, Denver's first true superstar. Mark, your thoughts on Floyd Little as a Bronco fan?
Yeah, it was a fitting ending to a pretty good career. It's been mediocre, but he's been a pretty decent player from what I remember.
When people talk about all the legendary names in Bronco history, it starts with him. Before Elway, before TD, before everybody, he was Denver's first true superstar.
It's almost a shame to think that his career ends after 75 and the Broncos go to the Super Bowl 2 years later. Almost like Tiki Barber with the Giants, calling it a day just a year or two before the Giants won the Super Bowl in 07.
Vinny, here's one. How about Fred Smerlas? He was with the Buffalo Bills forever, and after he departs from Buffalo, 4 straight Super Bowls.
Rams versus Packers. LA rams their way past Green Bay 22-5. The Packers led 5-0 on a safety and a field goal, but John Hadle, in his return to LA, looked like a shot fighter. 10 of 23, 115 yards and 2 picks. James Harris had a shoulder injury, but Ron Jaworski played efficiently, and the Rams' top-ranked defense was in the mint form. 6 sacks, 4 takeaways. LA has a tough game with Pittsburgh next week, but they still have a shot to catch Minnesota for the 1 seed. Never mind needing to avoid a flight to St. Louis. Charles, the Rams could be heading into the playoffs with a backup quarterback in Ron Jaworski. What does that say for the Rams team if James Harris won't be available?
That means the Rams are going to have to step it up defensively if they're going to get past Minnesota. If they're going to get past Minnesota, let's get past St. Louis.
By the way, the Rams have to win their finale against Pittsburgh, or their playoff game would be at Busch Stadium.
The Vikings versus the Lions. Detroit surprises Minnesota 17-10. The first ever indoor Vikings-Lions game led to a long overdue Detroit oasis, their first home win versus the Purple People Eaters since 1967. The Vikings, star of stars, had a bad day. Tarkenton was sacked 4 times, threw 2 interceptions, and is still yet to break United's touchdown pass record. There was no late rally, a la their first loss at Washington. In fact, their only touchdown was a Paul Krause 86-yard fumble return. And Minnesota still hasn't sewn up home field. They have to win at Buffalo to ensure the NFC will run through Metropolitan Stadium. Mark, the Lions get an upset win here, but does it really derail Minnesota's attempt to go to a 5th Super Bowl or a 4th Super Bowl in the NFC?
I don't think so. Even the best lose once in a while, but I still think they're going to be one of the best teams, one of the odds-on favorites, them and the Rams, to get to the Super Bowl. I can't see the Rams the Vikings losing their whole season because of that upset.
And meanwhile, as bad as Fran Tarkenton played, he was still better than Jared Goff yesterday.
Then we have the Jets and Chargers. The San Diego jolts the Jets 24-16. 1-11 versus 3-9. Oh, by the way, we're on December 15th now. 1-11 versus 3-9 on Monday Night Football. What more needs to be said? Well, the Chargers actually won their 2nd straight game thanks to a 249 yards rushing and the much maligned defense picking off 3 passes. San Diego didn't exactly hurt their draft position because of the expansion teams. As for New York, Joe Namath was benched for the first quarter because he was late for curfew. One has to wonder if Broadway Joe's time is up in Gotham. Charles, the Jets and Chargers combined 4 wins going into this game. What needs to be said?
Another game of all time.
Who in their right minds actually thought this would be a Monday night game? Remember, the Jets, neither team made the playoffs last year. Who thought in their right mind this would be the final game of the year?
I don't have flex scheduled back in 75. You did. You really think this game's going to be on Monday night? Come on.
No, really. I mean, why was it put on Monday night to begin with? Was it because of Joe Namath? Did they want to give him national exposure? And then if that's the case, he went and got himself benched before the game even started. Joe Namath being Joe Namath.
By the way, Vinny, I can answer your question. The Jets actually did have a winning record in 1974.
All right, taking a look at the NFC standings after 13 weeks. Your number 1 seed is not sewn up yet, but it's still Minnesota. They just need to win to clinch it. The Rams are number 2, and the Cardinals are number 3. All 3 have clinched their division, and Dallas has clinched the wild card. So there is no different, who's going to get in. We know the 4 teams. It's just a matter of who's 1 and who's 2, and potentially who's 3. Over in the AFC, your 1 seed is Pittsburgh. That's set in stone. Your 2 seed is Oakland. That is set in stone because of they hold the tiebreaker over Miami and Baltimore. And then the true question is Miami-Baltimore. Who's the 3 seed? Who's the 4 seed? Oh, I mean, who doesn't get in the playoffs? Because Cincinnati's your 4 seed. So thoughts on the AFC playoffs? 5 teams left, 4 teams in the NFC for a total of 9 teams left, and a grand total of 20 possible Super Bowl combinations after 13 weeks.
See what's in that? I thought click the wild card spot. Yeah, don't say W under there.
That's true because Miami would have a tiebreaker on Cincinnati if the both teams finish 10-4.
That is a good, interesting point.
I think.
Remember, in the Dolphins game, I literally said the Dolphins need to root for San Diego or New England.
Yep. The NFL playoff picture's far from settled, as we were just talking about. You could have any 2 different teams as a wild card, Cincinnati, Miami. 2 different teams as the AFC East champion, Miami and Baltimore. So, like I said, there's 9 teams left, a possible 20 Super Bowl 10 matchups still to go. And
remember, the Rams, and by the way, we don't even know about the Cardinals-Rams situation again. If the Rams lose to Pittsburgh, who haven't lost in September, and the Cardinals win at Detroit, then the Rams have to go to the St. Louis.
If you remember in our last episode at the end, I had a rant on the officials. Well, the NFL officials are really finally taking heat for strange calls, and so are the Jets. In a column here, Joe's benching lost point hurt millions when it comes to the bettors. Now, again, this is something that is always a controversy in how the money changes hands when it comes to Las Vegas and betting, and the NFL players aren't allowed to gamble. Same in baseball, basketball, but it always happens that there is some rumors, and sometimes it turns out to be true, as with Pete Rose in the early 90s when all those allegations came out, and of course, what's going on in basketball in 2025. Mark, what are your thoughts when it comes to sports betting in the NFL?
If you're a player, I don't think you should be betting in the NFL, especially on your own team. And that would play out later in a different sport, a different player. I don't think NFL players should be able to bet on other players and other teams. It's just no, respect the game, play the game. Don't try to make money off of betting. Back then or today.
Chris, we saw it in the 60s when Alex Karras and Paul Hornung were suspended. There's a big thing going to come in the 80s with Art Schlichter. Most recently, Calvin Ridley having to serve a 1-year suspension. Betting has always been a part of sports, whether you like it or not. But the NFL players, Major League Baseball players, NBA players, they are contractually prohibited from betting, especially on their own team or sport. But it always seems to sneak around, and we always hear about it. Now, this story isn't talking about the players doing it. It's more or less that Joe Namath's actions in being late for curfew cost the Jets his services when the game started, and that affected betting in a whole on Monday night.
I guarantee you this is Joe Namath breaking curfew. I guarantee it's not the first time he's done this. Oh, Charles, there's a little baseball headline. Something about give K-Line an assist for a Staub deal with. Is that Tigers related?
Yeah, Rusty Staub going to the Tigers.
Interesting.
December 17th, we have an NFL preview, and never mind the advertisements in the newspaper for a smut magazine, but Sunday's matchup, Orvis versus dirtiest player in the NFL. And who do they say is the dirtiest player in the NFL? If you look at it, it is
Conrad Dobler.
Conrad Dobler. I was thinking it was him, but I just couldn't remember his name. Of course, he's a member of the St. Louis Cardinals, and as they prepare for the game against Detroit. Mark, what do you think about when it comes to dirty players? Do you think sometimes that it's unfair to label a player a dirty player?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't. There are players that skirt the bounds a little bit. I don't know that anybody's playing dirty just to go out there and try to hurt somebody. I mean, there's some rough playing. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know if people will go out there and say, "I'm going to go out there and try to intentionally hurt somebody." Hard hitting's one thing. I don't. I can't imagine there being somebody being dirty.
And Mark, a little ironic, Vinny mentioned it to you because one of the more I don't want to call him well known, but a player who was kind of well known for being a little dirty or dirty not was ironically a guy who put on your team, Bill Romanowski.
Yeah, he's definitely skirted. He did a lot. He did a lot of stuff, especially on he spit in Stokes' face. He broke a guy's jaw when he was on the in practice. But I still never don't remember too many times that Romanowski even went out there and said, "I'm going to try to end this guy's career right here." You
Chris,
just don't see that.
Chris, what are your thoughts on Conrad Dobler being maligned as a dirty player?
Well, it's interesting because when you think of dirty players, you don't think offensive linemen. Like they're not delivering the headshots or the cheap shots of a defensive player. Because when you think dirty, you think, what's so dirty about being an offensive lineman? Well, apparently, sometimes players say maybe he steps on players, he'll bite them. But again, who's to say? I'm not an offensive lineman.
All right. Errol Parsegian, he will not coach for the pros in 76. The Jets want him, and once again, he will not. He is their number one choice, but he will not be going to the New York Jets. And Charles, we have a little baseball headline here: as Orlando Cepeda, former Major League Baseball star, was arraigned in a San Juan court on a narcotics deal, failed again Tuesday to post a $50,000 bond. U.S. Magistrate John Garcia, however, gave Cepeda until Thursday to raise the money. It was the third time since Monday that Cepeda had been given more time to come up with the money or go to jail.
Man, a couple of years ago, he was a designated hitter for the Red Sox, former MVP. How the money have fallen.
And we have some big news here for Atlanta rookie Steve Bartkowski, rookie quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, with his new wife, Jody, share a laugh after the wedding on Monday.
How about that little stretch for Barkowski? He beats the Niners on Sunday and he gets married on Monday.
Oh,
and that's on top of his good play against Washington and Oakland.
It's a Tuesday, so that means new cover photo. And Mark, it's Floyd Little.
Yes, it is.
That's the sixth. It's the 66-yard touchdown. His final
run.
The catch and run, final touchdown of his career in his last game at Mile High.
What a way to go out. What a way to go out. Most people don't go out on that high of a note.
Just real quick news from my hometown is the Rotary Honors football team. Guests at the Rotary Dinner program were John Raymond, head football coach for the Saranac Lake Redskins, and Jan Plummer, assistant coach. Both men would still be coaching when I played in 1995 and 96. Coach Raymond and Coach Plummer were principal speakers at the dinner program sponsored by the Tupper Lake Rotary Club, honoring the Tupper Lake football team. Division B winners from left: Frank Tice, head football coach; Carl Fenton, master of ceremonies; Ray Provost, Rotary Club President; Coach John Raymond, Mr. Plummer, and William Bauer, Superintendent of Tupper Lake Schools. So interesting that Tupper Lake, our main rival for Saranac Lake, had the head football coach and defensive coordinator of the Redskins be the keynote speakers for the Tupper Lake Rotary Dinner. Not sure how that works out, although Raymond was an alumnus of Tupper Lake, so maybe that's why.
Interesting.
So, also announcing here on episode 7, this page now has its own YouTube channel. If you follow this page, please subscribe. It is Pigskin Glory, football 50 years ago today.
Hey guys, we have our own YouTube channel.
NCAA Coach of the Year. It's now Thursday, December 18th, right? Thursday, yes. Coach of the Year from Durham, New Hampshire, Bill Bowes, the University of New Hampshire football coach, yesterday was named the District 1 Eastman Kodak Company Coach of the Year by the American Football Coaches Association. Bose, age 32, guided the Wildcats to a 9-3 record, the Yankee Conference Championship, and a berth in the Grantland Rice Bowl, the semifinals of the National Collegiate Athletic Association Division II Championship. In that game, New Hampshire lost to Western Kentucky 14-3. Bose is the second coach at the school to win Kodak Award in the past 7 years. Jim Root was the District 1 award winner in 1968 and was later named National Coach of the Year by the association. So there's a little small college Coach of the Year announcement here on this Thursday afternoon.
Remember, New Hampshire's a hockey school mainly, but winning 9 games at a school known for its hockey is pretty impressive.
So the NFL, we're still on the 18th. The NFL says no to Memphis and Birmingham as their bids to join the NFL as the 29th and 30th teams have been rejected. Charles, we talked about expansion. You mentioned how too much it could be a bad thing. Is the NFL right here to say no to 2 World Football League teams?
Yeah, not because of the former WFL cities, but too much, too fast can lead to some problems.
Hey, speaking of expansion, Charles, have the Seattle and Toronto teams been announced at this time?
I'm not sure.
Because remember, we're still about a year and a half away from those teams.
Big development for the LA Rams is John Cappelletti has mononucleosis, and of course, AKA known as a kissing disease. Not sure how he got it, but his services on Sunday against Green Bay are definitely in question.
No, they beat Green Bay. You're talking about the Steeler game. They beat the Packers.
Right, the Steelers. I'm sorry. I was just trying to read the line quickly. The NFL.
Well, luckily for the Rams, he's not their starting running back. Lawrence McCutcheon is their go-to guy, so at least they have McCutcheon to fall back on.
Couple inside sports news and notes for this Thursday. The NFL again rejects the expansion applications. The Buffalo Bills will not be on TV. The game between the Bills and Vikings at Orchard Park was not sold out, so if you want to catch it on TV, you'd better drive out to a hotel outside of the blackout range. Ken Stabler.
I want to touch on it. I wanted to touch on that black thing for just a second. Not a rant, but Vinny, the Eagles and Bills are playing this weekend. 35 years ago, the most famous Eagles-Bills game was locally blacked out in Buffalo. So how are we able to see the Randall Cunningham Bruce Smith play if that game was locally blacked out?
Well, I watched it because I live 6 hours away, but yeah, you drive out to a hotel room outside the blackout.
Think about that, Mark. One of the most famous games. Think about that. Can you believe that game was blacked out in Buffalo? Philly. Contender.
Don't forget the Steeler Max reception game was blacked out. My dad had to drive an hour and a half away in Ohio, rent a hotel room to watch that Steeler game.
Okay, that one is a little different because it's before the law change. All home games are blacked out at that point. The game Chris is talking about.
I know, but I'm just saying I've heard of it. That doesn't surprise me because my dad told me when I was a kid about that. I understand the rules were a little different, but going out of your way to watch a game that was blacked out is nothing new to me. It happens.
I watched a television episode. I forget the name of the show, but it was from 1968, and they were talking about a playoff game. So it was January 1st, 68, the show aired, and drawing a blank on the name, but in the show, the 2 main characters drive outside of Los Angeles to a hotel so they're able to watch the, maybe it was 78, 68 or 78. It was one of those January 1st airing of a comedy on primetime network television, but they touched on that. Stabler, Oakland Raider quarterback Ken Stabler, will be the featured celebrity at the 28th annual Gannett Rochester Press Award Charity Sports Award dinner to be held February 3rd at the Holiday Inn in downtown Rochester, New York. Stabler has led Oakland to a 10-3 record this year and an American Football Conference berth. Interesting that they couldn't get Joe Ferguson to do it. They're calling out to Oakland to bring in their quarterback.
That's never even crazy. And remember, Vinny, Ferguson is tied for the lead in touchdown passes.
Ragtime is OJ's quitting time. OJ's future as professional football player apparently hinges on the Cole House Walker Jr. Walker is not a linebacker or coach. He's a mythical New Orleans jazz piano player. The role of Coalhouse Walker in the movie Ragtime is the major factor in Simpson's decision to either retire from football or return to the Buffalo Bills. This role is not something that would really solidify my acting career, says Simpson last week. The book, if it's being adapted from a bestseller, already Paul Newman and Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones have been cast. It should be one of the year's major films, and filming is scheduled to begin in September. Chris, what could this say about the Buffalo Bills in 1976 if OJ retires to be in this movie?
OJ has to be in the movie in 1976. Jim Braxton is about to get all the carries, literally.
Definitely an interesting situation, and not something you really hear about modern times, but players do sometimes leave for other roles or job offers being given to them throughout the history of the NFL. NFL transactions: the Cleveland Browns have claimed veteran defensive back Joe Beauchamp off waivers from San Diego, so he goes from one two-win team to another. Washington signed running back Bob Anderson, who was placed on waivers by the New England Patriots, and cornerback Pat Fisher has been placed on injured reserve.
From New England to Washington, talk about an upgrade.
December 19th now, as the Cleveland Browns have placed running back Cleo Miller on injured reserve. Florida State has signed running backs John Bell and Fred Nixon of Miami Carroll. Signed lineman Bill Rowe of Greenville, South Carolina. Now, this is not signing as in contracts in 1975. It is part of the national high school signing recruiting for college. Let's take a look at the high school five-star conference all-star team and see if there's any names that we're going to talk about in the future. Center David Morford of DeLand, guard Gerald Mayer of Sanford, and Terry Calkins of DeLand. Tackle Mike Good of Sanford, Scott Patterson of Spruce Creek. Tight ends Darrell Green of Mainland, split end James Murphy of DeLand, quarterback Mark Wiggum of Sanford. Running back Bobby Butler, Spruce Creek, Frank Lawrence of Seabreeze, Tim Raines of Sanford, Kenny Scott of Mainland, Sanford Cutts of DeLand, kicker Keith Smith of DeLand, and punter Charles McIntosh of Mainland. Now, I'm not sure what newspaper I got this from. It's probably Florida, but none of those names were.
Charles, is this that Tim Raines?
I think it's probably a different Tim Raines, unless of course he played football in college and then to go into baseball when he was drafted by the Expos.
Looking at the defense, nose guard Johnny Daniels
I'll
of
look it
DeLand,
up.
tackle Mark Jenkins of Seabreeze, Henry Demps of DeLand, end Frank Grady of DeLand, Greg Pringle of Sanford, linebacker Rusty Bennett of Mainland, Johnny Wilson of DeLand, backs Ricky Deans of DeLand, Glenn Patrick of DeLand, Lafayette Ashley of Mainland, and Herbert Branch of Sanford.
By the way, Tim Raines, I think he did play football. He also rushed for 1,000 yards in 8 football games and set 2 school track and field records right over several years while he was with the Seminoles at Seminole High School.
All right, moving on to December 20th.
He started out of high school, so he didn't. So Tim Raines never played college football.
It is the final weekend of the NFL, opening up on Sunday with a couple games. Minnesota skulls Buffalo 35-13. In the Orchard Park snow, there were many questions to be answered. Would the Vikings clinch NFC home field? Would Fran Tarkenton break Johnny Unitas' record for touchdown passes? Would Chuck Foreman or O.J. Simpson pass Gale Sayers' single-season touchdown record? The first two answers would be yes. Minnesota jumped out 21-7 while forcing 5 turnovers, got the number 1 seed, and Fran Tarkenton threw touchdown pass number 291 to set an all-time record. As for the other touchdown record, O.J. Simpson scored twice for a record 23 touchdowns on the year. Chuck Foreman scored 4 touchdowns of his own and would have had a fifth and not a fumble at the 3, thus having to settle for a tie with the Kansas Common at 22. For Minnesota, now the road to the 3rd straight Super Bowl goes through Bloomington as they seek the NFC three-peat. Chris, the Bills, that's not the way they wanted to finish up, but Minnesota had something to prove coming out in this game, and they got the job done in this snow game. What are your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills 1975 season?
If only they had a defense or luck.
Charles,
look at that
Vikings,
football weather. Look at that football weather.
the Vikings are heading into the NFC
Wow.
playoffs as your number 1 seed, and you'll see more weather like this in Bloomington. The Rams, Cardinals, and Cowboys might have to go to Minnesota. What are your thoughts if you had to travel to play football in Minnesota in January?
I would not look forward to going there, but you have to go to Minnesota to get the Super Bowl. You'll take your chances.
And Charles, funny you mention this because your 49ers actually won a playoff game there once upon a time in December of 1970.
I think I remember that.
The Vikings come within a Jim Lash of losing the ball. The Vikings and Bills battled on a snowy Saturday afternoon in Buffalo, and Chuck Foreman was heading into the end zone when he fumbled, but receiver Jim Lash was there to recover and register the touchdown. Of course, even with the future holy roller rule, this would still count as it happened in the first quarter.
By the way, that fumble, that is the reason. Otherwise, Foreman and OJ would have both had 23 touchdowns. By the way, what do you think of that weather? That is football weather.
Especially playoff football weather at that too.
In the Tangerine
What a shame
Bowl,
that such a
in the first game of the bowl season at Orlando, Miami of Ohio, the Redskins, whipped South Carolina, the Gamecocks, 20-7. The scourge of the MAC looked every bit a part of a team that has gone 31-1-1 in the last 3 seasons. Rob Carpenter ran for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Fred Johnson kicked 2 field goals, and their defense allowed but 1 score against a 7-3 SEC team. This is the last year the MAC was affiliated with this game. One has to wonder maybe if another bowl game might allow a team of the Redskins' caliber to play opponents closer to them in terms of ranking and record. You look at the headline, you see Miami tops USC. You're like, wow, the Hurricanes played the Trojans? Nope, the other Miami and the other USC.
And remember, this is an era with fewer bowl games, so it's not. Remember, guys, this was before the Holiday Bowl.
I was gonna say this is when only 2 teams really went to conference from the would go to the bowl games.
Yeah, remember Miami was a MAC team, so a MAC team getting to play in a bowl. This isn't like nowadays.
Mark, here's your Broncos finishing up their season against Denver. Denver has a chance to play spoiler, but Miami denies them 14-13. The Dolphins' situation was simple. Beat Denver on Saturday and hope for an upset of either Cincinnati or Baltimore on Sunday. But the 13-point favorite Dolphins were struggling just to do their part as they fell behind 10-0 and 13-7 even at the Orange Bowl on a day they held Floyd Little to 25 yards rushing in his final game. But Earl Morrall, out of the last 2 weeks, came on late and led a clutch touchdown drive. 11 plays, 80 yards, 6 minutes, which all led to Norm Boulash's last-minute go-ahead touchdown. Still, they nearly blew it again as Denver drove for a game-winning 35-yard field goal that was blocked on the game's final play. Now, Miami has to hope for one of 2 things. San Diego make it 3 straight wins and upset Cincinnati team that might be nursing a Steeler hangover. New England turns the clock back to 1971 and upsets a Colts team that at Baltimore playing for division title. If not, the Dolphins will look back at the 2 blocked extra points at Houston and their offense nothing last week at Baltimore as what has derailed their season. Mark, your thoughts on Denver coming up short in the role of spoiler, but still giving Miami all they could have?
It would have been nice, but I wasn't surprised. I figured Miami was going to find a way to win and give it everything they had to make one more playoff run. You could tell that you could just get the feeling that this was their going to be their last hurrah, and they weren't going to go down to the Broncos, who are not yet really established. They're making noises but can't sustain anything just yet.
2 notable things from this game. Number 1, this is the last NFL game regular season. This is the last time the Dolphins will play a home game on AstroTurf. And number 2, Mark, this will be the last time Denver will play at Miami for a long, long time.
The Broncos liked the Vikings play so much they used it in their game. The Denver Broncos apparently were watching the Vikings-Bills game earlier in the day and liked their fumble-rooski so much they tried it themselves against Miami. Same thing, the running back fumbles, and the receiver, this time tight end Riley Odoms, recovers the ball for the exact same 14-0 score.
Just like John Ralston threw it up, eh?
Weird how the same play happened in both games on this Saturday, but it is what it is. He wants to be in the end zone where everybody yells, Norm! Trailing 13-7 and fighting for the playoffs, Miami dig deep, and fullback Norm Boulache leapt into the air, coming down just in time to score against Denver from the 1-yard line and take the lead. The Dolphins would hold on to win 14-13.
This, Vinny, this is the last time the Dolphins will ever play a home game on AstroTurf.
That means that the Dolphins winning. That means Cincinnati has to win tomorrow to clinch the division. If they lose, they're out.
And Baltimore has to win too.
But the NFL day is not over. We have a triple header on this Saturday as Los Angeles Rams passed Pittsburgh 10-3. The Saturday night had all the makings of a blockbuster showdown, but the Steelers had wrapped up everything last Saturday in Cincinnati. Even though Minnesota clinched home field, this game did mean a lot for LA's as a win wraps up the 2 seed. A loss, however, meant that if the Cardinals win on Sunday, their divisional round game would be on the road. Terry Bradshaw played only a half, but it was still 3-3 after 3 quarters, and the Rams were staring at a flight to St. Louis. On a day where both teams had similar rushing yards, 3 interceptions by LA was the difference as they got a late touchdown. Even though they lost for the first time since week 2, the Steel Curtain, unlike that Buffalo game, did their part here with only 10 points and 233 yards of offense allowed. For the Rams, they ensured a home game, and with the NFL's number 1 scoring defense, they have certainly closed with a flourish since that 49er outlier in October. Mark, the Steelers didn't have a lot to play for as we talked about in the snaps, but their defense came up big. Just how good are the 1975 Steelers heading into the playoffs?
I think they're very good. Defensively, they're almost unstoppable. It's what will the Steelers do in the AFC when they have to play somebody that's got a decent defense? Can their offense put up just enough points to win, or will their offense struggle? That'll be the only thing that'll stop them. And if they're at home, and since they're at home, it's going to be really, really hard for anybody to go into Three Rivers and beat them in Pittsburgh.
Counterpoint, Mark. Pittsburgh's one real loss was against the best offense in football and the Bills. How is there another offense you think is capable of making them have to play on their heels like the Bills did?
The only team I see is the Raiders.
All right, let's go around
I
and give your final thoughts on these 10 days. Chris, December 11th to the 20th, your thoughts.
Miami basically handing the division to Baltimore on a silver platter.
What about you, Mark? Your thoughts?
Pittsburgh wrapping up the home field. Miami's legacy, their 4-year runs all come to an end. And you also saw the end of the Redskins. They had a 3 or 4 year stint in the playoff, and they're out of the playoffs now.
Charles?
What's the question?
What are your thoughts?
Your thoughts on the 10 days?
Well, we pretty much know who will play on matchup store. I got a feeling it's probably going to be the Steelers against the Vikings in Super Bowl 10.
So here are my thoughts and the thing I'm going to discuss in my closing essay, my closing argument, if you will, this time. It is the end of 2 legendary NFL careers and potential Hall of Famers, as Len Dawson and Floyd Little's careers come to an end. Dawson's due to injury, as his career has already ended earlier in the season, and Floyd Little's on the field in a 1-point loss to the Dolphins. Floyd Little never got the advantage of playing on a playoff team. Floyd Little, out of the Denver Broncos, came close a couple times, but just never made it. Had he been a playoff contender and got to play in the tournament, perhaps he'd be more well remembered today, like some of the other great running backs of the 70s. Now, O.J. Simpson only played in 1 playoff game, and he had that 2,000-yard season, but Floyd Little is right up there with him as far as starting running backs in the AFC in the 70s. Floyd Little goes down as, at this point, the greatest Bronco running back. With time to come, that will change, obviously. We haven't seen names like Terrell Davis yet, but in 1975, he is where it's at. Now, Len Dawson. Len Dawson is a name that more people notice. Whether you watched him play with the Dallas Texans and Kansas City Chiefs, but his career goes all the way back to the late 50s when he came into the NFL on the Cleveland Browns. However, Len Dawson will be in the NFL Hall of Fame. He is in the NFL Hall of Fame looking back 50 years, and he is the quarterback who won 3 AFL championships and 1 Super Bowl championship in 1969, 1970, as we talked about. Len Dawson is not considered the greatest quarterback in Kansas City Chief history anymore because of Patrick Mahomes. But before the quarterback from Texas Tech took the Chiefs to all these Super Bowls in the late teens and early 20s, Len Dawson was and had been for over 50 years the greatest quarterback in Kansas City history. He was a lot to measure up to. Quarterbacks down the line, from Bill Kenny to Todd Blackledge to even Joe Montana's stint in Kansas City, never matched what Len Dawson had in Kansas City. And although looking back on it now since 2018, perhaps his time with the Chiefs isn't looked on as great as it was because of Patrick Mahomes, there is no doubt that he was Mr. Kansas City when they first moved to Missouri, and the legacy he built by winning that Super Bowl, Super Bowl 4, lasted for 50 years before the Chiefs got another Super Bowl in Super Bowl 54. Len Dawson may not have the same name from some of the other quarterbacks in the 70s like Terry Bradshaw and Roger Staubach, but Len Dawson was Kansas City, and without him, the Chiefs won't be back in the playoffs until 1986. So when a legend retires, don't be too quick when your aging legend is getting near the end of his time to wish for the next quarterback. Because after Jim Kelly left Buffalo and Doug Flutie left, we didn't have another playoff quarterback until 2017 and Tyrod Taylor. Enjoy the career you have. I remember hearing Giants fans wishing Eli Manning would be gone at the end of their career, and how are they thinking now with Eli Manning gone and a string of losing quarterbacks that just haven't measured up. So Len Dawson's career ends at the end of 1975.